So today we have a special project. We're gonna build a new PC. I'm gonna use the Intel Arc A750. Got some G-Skill RipSaw S5. This is made for the Intel processors. I also have a i9, the 12 gen. Today, kind of seeing what the 14 gen is going to look like. It doesn't make a lot of sense to spend the money on a 14 gen or a 13 gen even, when the 12 gen for the price point that I could get it at, which was extremely cheap, is better than what you'll find. Or I should say this, performance for dollar is very good, and it's cheaper than what you'll find in many of the 13 and when the 14 gens come out next month, it'll beat that as well. I also have a Samsung M.2, the 980 Pro, 1 terabyte drive, which is fine for my use and probably fine for most people's usage. We got the AK6200 dark, so this is the one that's black all the way across instead of having like the bare aluminum silver color. So that's our cooler. Got a 750 watt Corsair power supply, which is plenty enough to run the major things here, which are going to be the processor. The processor is about 300 watts. It's actually about 250 max, 260 max. The Intel card is about 250 max as well, so that's 500. So there's still, 250 watts to run all the other things, and all the other things are pretty basic. The other thing we have here is just the MSI Z690A. I thought about going with a 790, but honestly, for the money, this board as part of the package was super cheap. The board, the 790 board, would cost probably 2x or more, right? So not worth it to me. So we're gonna go ahead and start building this thing. And I just have a standard mid-tower ATX case. Nothing too fancy, because not a fancy need here. So we're gonna start building this and putting it together. So we'll just take a look at what's inside here. This is just the box that comes with the case. Inside is a grate. All right. But fans are already mounted. Fans already mounted. I'm going to take off the magnetic shield here. Mainly because every time I touch it, it keeps moving. So we're going to go ahead and start taking it apart and start taking it apart. And there's just a screw back here, back in the corner here. There's just a screw back here in the corner that you have to take out in order to take off this plexiglass. So I'm going to set those aside together. Excuse me, it's tempered glass, not plexi. So be careful with it. So inside, you know, it's a pretty standard case. We're actually going to take the other side, but they have 3 fans, 1 here and 2 in the front. Kind of difficult to see, but so we'll go ahead and I'm going to take off the bottom little shield as well. They just kind of get in the way. So I'm going to take the other side panel off for help mounting the board, the motherboard. So I'm going to set that aside. And you know, it's a pretty basic setup where all of them are very similar. Here on the back side, this is where your motherboard outputs are going to go. If you have video card, other PCI expansion cards can go here. You can kind of see here, you can run different cables inside. They have some zip ties for some cable management. They have power button and a couple different USBs here at the top. Looks like USB, it's probably USB, probably USB 2.0 is the black one, and probably could be a 3.0A for the other. They have a headphone jack and a reset button and a power button, like I said, and 2 LEDs. So we're gonna go ahead and here on the side, you know, we have, like I was saying, it's wrapped in here. So you have the different headers, controllers for your different drives here. These are all 5-volt controllers. Okay, here's just the MSI Pro Z690A with Wi-Fi. So we'll go ahead and open that. So inside, you have your motherboard here. You have the back plate. You have some SATA data connect. Your drivers, which have already changed. Registration card, quick install guide, all important. Couple standoffs for your M.2s. This is a standoff for also for an M.2, but this is the locking standoff for the main one, and another one. And you got 2 antennas for your Wi-Fi. So, you know, has a few things in there. A little bit about the board. So I'm just gonna pull it out of its wrapping here. So, PC goes here. You have 4 DDR5 slots here. You have your PCI. This is your first slot, which is the X16 or by 16. You have a couple other PCI 3 slots here. You have your, this is where your, if you have a SDS that's an M.2 for your primary, probably this is the best place to put is behind this. I'll take that off here in a little bit. You have a couple more places here where you put them. So it can do 3 total. This is your power, some other connections for USBs and fans, and what else is big here? Some of your SATA places here, or SATA controller or connections, data connections. A little bit about the back. You have a couple of, you have 4 2.0s. You have two 3.0s, I think, or 3.1s maybe. And then you have one 3.2. So this is the 10 gigabit. And then you have a USB-C, the antennas, and a couple different audios. You do have a PS2 connection here for keyboard or mouse. And then you also have, this is the BIO flash button, so you can flash the BIO. Now we're gonna just open up the power supply, kind of look at it, see what's in there. So inside we just have some zip ties and screws, safety, compliance information here, you know, multiple languages. This is a fully modular unit, so that means all the plugs come out. Your 120 volt power supply that plugs up to your house. And the unit itself. So, unit itself. We'll just set all this aside. So, like I said, just have your standard plug in for the AC, power switch on and off, the different modular plugs depending on what you need to plug in. So we'll go ahead and set that to the side. So what we're going to do is we're going to hook up some of these cables. And this will be dependent upon what you have for your setup. Me, I'm going to have a power supply that's coming off of it, or excuse me, a video card that's coming off the power supply. And I'm going to have the CPU. So they'll be labeled like CPU. Right, and you have a couple of those. Then you have some PCI, as you can see there. So we'll have to look at, you know, what we're gonna power up. And for my case, I'm looking for the motherboard. Here's another PCI. So this one here, it's just a split for the motherboard. Looks to be a 16 pin and a 10 pin. And like I said, there's some PCI, CPU. So for this, like I said, there's motherboard, which is two different ones. There's a couple SATAs, which I have no SATA drives, but the SATA have the little L. You're gonna have, this is one of the PCIs. So this is a 6+2 type pin for a PCI. And that means it's an 8-port over here. And I do have a couple PCIs that this needs to go into. Here's another SATA. I'm gonna plug it in, but leave it wrapped because I don't have that many SATA drives. And maybe in the future I'll add some, but as of right this second, I don't have enough to fill this. All right, so we're back here, motherboard, and we got the quick start manual. So I'm gonna pull that out pretty quick here and just kind of look over it. And we're gonna mount the processor in there. And that way we can get it running. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and open up the processor. This little guy goes out here, factory seal. You can see here. It has its own little manual, and they love to give you these Intel Core stickers to put on your cases and things like that. If you lose one of these, you can actually, or you tear it up or whatever it is, you can actually get a replacement on Intel's website if you want to have that sticker. Maybe I'll try to find the link for it. I haven't used it ever, but I've seen it, and I know some people who have used it. So it's there, it's real. You know, so it's there, it's real. So just comes out. Key behind most of this is try not to touch any of this, any of the pins. Don't bend any of the pins. You know, it comes in a little plastic bubble wrap. Pretty good there. Then we'll put on the cooler here shortly. But we'll go ahead and get this guy mounted into this section. So there's a little lift there that comes out. So you want to hang on to this. And the reason you want to hang on to this little black one, is if you ever have to send back your motherboard, they want that to come with it so there's no damage to the pin receptacles here on it. So you can see here, there's a little arrow. It's hard to see on the motherboard, but there's also a little arrow. So you have to line those up in order to get it in there. So what I like to do is stick it in there and just a slight little jiggle, and it's in. Then what you do, you have to close it down. You have to close it down to hold it in. Same way you pulled it out, just in reverse. Now it's in, it's all connected. Big thing is, don't touch the back of that, the processor, the heat shield, with your fingers. You don't want that kind of grease getting on there. So, like I said, hold on to the plastic piece. I'm gonna move some of those things out of the way, and we'll start putting some of this together, or more of it together. So we're gonna open up the cooler. These things used to come with your PCs. They used to be much smaller. When I say much smaller, I mean a tenth of the size, you know, or at least half the size in all cases, until you got into the high-end ones. You know, these things are 60 bucks today for a basic one, or not a basic one, but a less than high-end. And they used to be a lot more affordable. So like I said, used to be a lot more affordable. Now, they don't even come with them. Processors are crazy expensive. I remember buying motherboards and processors together for 200 bucks for a mid-tier, with mid-tier, and it had everything you needed except for, you know, hard drive and RAM and an operating, or monitors, things like that. Today's are very expensive in comparison. I've been building systems off and on for more than 20 years at this point, so this is just the hardware kit for the cooler. Let's see what's in there real quick. Should be a mounting kit. Instructions. A couple LED power cable, looks like. You have your thermocool, so it's in there as well. They give you a screwdriver. Isn't that nice of them? So inside the kit, you'll just have a couple different, standoff and plate sizes. So we'll go ahead and do that. So because this is an Intel board, an Intel plate, Intel cooler, not Intel cooler, excuse me, a cooler that's kind of made for the Intels, it should go in there pretty simply. So we'll go ahead and just stick it in there. Just mounts on the back, like so. And just make sure that it's all lined up and you get all the everything all lined up. You can put on your standoffs here. Okay. So you have a couple different kits here, and we'll look at which one goes to which, because I have not used this, and so I don't know offhand. And don't want to say it's one thing or the other. So these are just, they have them listed as a couple different things, but this is D, just slides on there. Fingerish tight, you don't need a tool for this. Personally, this is about all you need. It's finger tight. And I just use the tip of my fingers. We'll put these other two in. And we have to put on the crossbar. The mounting bar. Excuse me, it's not a crossbar, it's a mounting bar. And then what we'll do is we will put on the thermo paste, and we'll put on thermo paste here in a moment. After we get this all set up, we'll mount the board. Actually, we'll put in RAM first, mainly because the cooler is so large it's going to take up for RAM. I'm going to put in the hard drive as well under this. So we will put in a couple things all together. All right, so they want the long bar to go like so. And it kind of defaults, they have like a 1, 2, 3 on here. It's kind of defaulted to around the 2 range, which probably is okay. We'll see when we get a little closer. All right, so now they just want to put on the end caps, and the end caps are just in another little baggie here. They're just topped with little Phillips head. So we'll go ahead and screw those guys on. So what I am going to do is I like to do a dry mount run just to see how it'll look. See, make sure it works. So we're going to do that with these just kind of finger tight or just kind of loose there. That way if we need to shift anything around, we can. I'm going to put up some of these other things that I'm not using or don't need. And I think, just double check the manual here. There's a warning sticker. Make sure you take that off, and I'll show you that here in a second. You do have to take apart the cooler in order to get it to work. So I am going to do some of that now. So you got to take this sticker off before you mount it. You also have to take out the two, these are fans. I think you only have to really take out the one here in the middle. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So like I said, there's just a little metal section that you just pop off. Take those out. Set that out of the way. So for this one, looks like it mounts best. Yeah, only mounts one way, which is the main fan towards the RAM. So like I said, we're gonna have to put the RAM in first. So we'll go ahead and grab that and throw that in. And again, just some DDR5, nothing special. These are 600 megahertz. Yeah, 600 megahertz. So nothing crazy. I mean, none of those super high-end models don't need that. Typically on these boards, you'll put them in where it's like like if you can see it, this is DIM A1, DIM A2, DIM B2, B1, etc. So typically you put them in the place that they go, and like you would put them in 1 and 1 and 2 and 2, right? So I'm going to stick this in A1 and I'm going to stick it in B1. So typically you just kind of push it in there lightly, and then you just push up these two little side pieces just to make sure that it fully connects. Super simple. I'm going to do it here on the second one. Same way, just kind of firmly on both ends, slide it down. You don't push too hard, but you got to push hard enough for it to seat. And once it seats, you'll hear that little click, and just make sure that your little tabs are all the way in. So let's go ahead and prep this guy for mounting. Actually, we're gonna put it in the hard drive. So again, I think this is so big that it'll take up that too. You could probably put the hard drive or the SSD. Sorry, I'm old school. I call everything a hard drive. You could probably put that in without with the cooler installed. But you know what? I'm here. Let's just go ahead and do it. So this is my first Samsung SSD, and it actually comes in a pretty good little package, pretty secure, better than some of the others I've seen. And I bought, you know, quite a few of these. It does have a manual in here somewhere under the casing. Now I've never, like I said, this is the first Samsung, but I've had other brands. I don't have a favorite. I think they're all very similar, but some people have favorites. I do not. At least I don't play favorites. So I'm gonna just slide these over. And like I said, there's multiple ports for the M.2. This is the 20 lane, so the number of lanes somewhat affect the speed. I say somewhat because it's not exact. So I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in, and a lot of times they kind of go in at a little angle. Goes in at a little angle. Slide it forward. This one has a little latch. It's very difficult to see, but the little latch just puts it in place. And then you close it down on it, and it's installed. So I am going to put this one back. Now there was two different screws here. One has the standoff and one does not. The one with the standoff is the one towards the back here. They also have a little thermal paste shield you know, so when you put it on there, it will help cool or keep it cool as part of the thermal shield. So we'll go ahead and put that on, which is nice, right? I mean, you want your hard drives, right? I mean, again, not technically a hard drive, but you want them to, as much as possible, stay cool. It'll have everything that you have in electronics typically staying cool. It will keep it alive longer, right? There's a joke that we used to have back in the Navy: don't let this magic smoke out of your electronics. And I firmly believe that, that's a real thing, because every time that I've ever seen an electronic die, for the most part, this is, and you may not be able to always see it until you look inside, it's usually a capacitor that melts or that blows up. It doesn't blow up like explode, just it crashes, it burns. Or you have something similar, right? And so you'll see smoke coming out of it. I mean, I've literally had a car I was driving one time, and the dashboard, I saw smoke come out of the dashboard, and then all of a sudden the dashboard just went completely blank, because that's what it is, right? It let the magic smoke out, it didn't work anymore. So they tell you just to kind of dab it on there. I'm going to dab a little bit, and then I'm going to spread it a little bit, because that's just the way I like to do it. I like to cover as much of this as I can. Right, without it getting all over the place. But I'm going to use pretty much everything they have in here. And the reason I say that is this stuff is relatively cheap, and it conducts heat. It's, it has a conductance material. It's like, can be aluminum, it can be, so there's some that say diamond, different ones. So I just kind of smear it around and try to get the entire heat shield. And the reason I do that and not have big piles of it anywhere, and the reason you want to do that is you want your CPU to stay as cool as possible. And in order to do that, you got to, you got to kind of spread it out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install this. Well, I'm going to tighten it, because now we've seen that it works. So I'm going to tighten this so that they're nice and tight. Again, don't need to be Superman, just need to be tight enough to hold it down. And these are not moved very much, right? So you don't need them to, you're not gonna, it's not like a laptop. You don't need a lot of pressure. All right, so again, fan is gonna go outwards. Move the wiring out of the way here. So this is why they give you this long piece here. Now you don't want to be too tight on this as well, right? You want it to be nice and snug, but it doesn't need to be Superman. So what I'm going to do is just snug it down. Make sure it touches. Never turn it on without it touching. You will fry your GPU in minutes. I've seen that done as like a test. It was quite funny. So go ahead and get this guy finished up, snugged up. And then what we'll do is we will mount, well, we'll plug this up, like the fans to the CPU side, which is here behind this drive. You can't see it, it's back here. Usually they'll be labeled something like that, like CPU fan, system fan. We're going to go ahead and install the fan that we took out of the cooler back in. Again, it's a pretty simple little, slide. Just make sure you have it going the correct way, which is pretty simple considering that the one in front of it does the exact same thing. So I'm going to slide the cabling down, and I'm going to have the brackets go towards the back in my install here. And just slide it down there until it gets about to the right height. Slide on one bracket, slide on the other side. Boom, done. Okay. I'm gonna hook up the two fans into the motherboard. I just, I'm standing here, why not? So I'm gonna go ahead and just hook them up. They have two, it's a little Y plug, a little Y here. So just hook it up. Now we got that all done. Let's go ahead and put in our video motherboard, a little breakout panel here. Right now I'm just moving some of the wiring and stuff out of the way so that it's not in my way when I go to mount the board. All right, so I'm gonna clean up a couple things real quick just so we don't have that. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and mount this guy. We're gonna mount the power supply, then we're gonna mount the motherboard, and we'll be about done. So again, for the motherboard, just slides in there, 4 screws. See if I can get it on camera here. It just slides in there. And it has all those Molex, peripherals, all that in there. So it just slides in like so. Like I said, we'll do some cable routing and things like that. Probably not today to make it pretty, but today to make it functional. And then maybe another day we'll do a video on making it look a little prettier, but we'll see. So there's a little lip that this goes on, and once it's on that little lip, then you should be able to see the screw holes. And you still have to hold it forward a little bit. Like I said, there's 4. There's 4 here. And I like them, I like bottom mount power supplies. I know there are some cases still that do the top mount. I like bottom mount. Just always have. All right. So just finished tightening it up here. Okay, let's go ahead and throw it in the old motherboard here. It's important to be careful, or throw in the motherboard, I should say. Important to be careful not to bend the card. Motherboard card. It's important to get them to line up here without putting a lot of stress on anything. Put it a little closer here. So, it just has to slide in there. You just need to get close to the screws. So then you just put in a couple little screws in there to fasten her down. And, you know, they're just 5 or 6 screws that you put in. So I like to just get them in there first, and then I'll tighten them all up together. And there's, you know, you can fit about 6 or so, and you can change some of the standoffs and put more. There's usually somewhere between 10 and 8 screws. What we're going to do is we're going to put on the Wi-Fi antennas. They just go on the back here. They just go on the back here. You know, they just twist in. And I'm just going to twist them in so they're out of the way. And I'll determine how I want to put them in to my, once I set the desktop on the ground, right? Because I don't want to block the USB ports or the Ethernet cable, because I'm going to have it hardwired. There's USB, Ethernet, display, HDMI back here. So I want to make sure that I can use those. All right, so I'm going to just run it like this with it set up this way, and like I said, do the testing, and then we'll come back and install a graphics card. All right, so we're back. All I did was take out, you know, one of these SATA driver connections, and I'm gonna tuck these in because I do have some SATA drives that I'm gonna put in later. I'm gonna fix up some of the wiring here. I'm also gonna run the PCI power connector through, which is what's gonna power our GPU. So in this particular case, they do have a couple zip tie areas already built in. So I am going to use those. It'll just help keep things a little neater, a little nicer. And this side of the case is closed anyway, so nobody will really see this. And on top of that, I am one of those people who do not, I keep mine on the desk, right? So I don't care about the lights, and I don't care about how it's going to look, because nobody's going to see it but me and you, because you're now on seeing it or watching it on video. And like I said, I'm not plugging up any of the lights here. I don't care about those. So you're going to see me not use those whatsoever, and I'm going to leave them just the way they are. And on this particular computer, this particular case, they actually have a little connection section here, a little port, a little hub, whatever you want to call it, for the lighting, so you could actually run the power cables to that. But like I said, I am not gonna run it, so I don't care about it. Just gonna, like I said, grab a couple zips, zip tie a couple things here. I want to keep wiring from the back of the CPU because it gets hot there. Warm, shouldn't get hot, but it does get warm. So I do want to zip tie these cables here to it. Away from it, I should say, not to it, to the case is what I was thinking. So they have a couple little spots where you can run zip ties through to help out. So, like I said, it just goes there, and that's kind of how I'm going to leave it. It's just like that. And, You might be able to see it there in the camera, but I just have it so this is all open. There's a reason why they have it open, and I'm going to run another zip tie right here just to hold these all together and use, like I said, they have a little Velcro one here that I'm going to use as well for some of these bigger ones that will help just hold them in place. Okay, and here's the SATA drive controllers. I'm just going to tuck those back in because right now I'm not going to put in the SATA drives that I have. Maybe I'll end up putting in some, and this is just the SATA cage that they have. There we go. Slides in. There's a little screw that you just put at the top here. So what I'm going to do now is just install the blank side. So just tightening in the screws there. Pretty, you know, you got to make sure that there's enough space and the cables aren't in the way or anything like that. And pretty easy, pretty simple. So we're done with the sides here. Okay, we're back. So what I've done is just went ahead and run the respective cables. These are the fan for the CPU. Now what I did is for this, just kind of ran them inside the little grommet here and up and then out, because the CPU gets plugged in here. Earlier I said that it got plugged in, you know, over here in this system. I was completely wrong. That was just didn't see the CPU side. So the other parts that I did here, I just, like I said, just ran the cables out, ran the USB hub that goes, or that goes to the top here. The motherboard power supply just goes in here. The fans for the systems, they'll say like Sys1, Sys2, right? So different fans, like this is system 1. On this particular one, I have system 2 and 3 plugged up here on the corners. Just here. 2 and 4, sorry. I have 2 and 4 plugged up. The writing's hard to see, but I also just ran the power button switch, hard drive light, LED lights here. And they just kind of run down from the top. So what we're going to do is go ahead and try it this way. We're going to button it up here in a second. We're going to try it without the video card, and then we're going to take a couple little, you know, bench settings, and then see where we're at, and then come back to it. But we'll see where we're at. Here's some benchmark using the user benchmark app. As you can see here, gaming's pretty low at 22%. Desktop is 111%. Workstation was also pretty low. And this is using the integrated card only. I do not even have the GPU, the Arc, installed yet. Everything else was pretty good if you look at it. Everything else rated really high. So the integrated GPU was the problem. Here's just a little more bench testing with CPU-Z. As you can see here, just, you know, the motherboard is, you know, the one I'm using that I installed with. I have 32 gigs of RAM. As you can see, I'm running an XMP 3.0 for 6,000 megahertz. And then just showing here's the card. There's only the integrated card. So running this, you'll see that I get pretty good numbers, about 11,300, which is pretty good. You know, it's definitely performing much better than, say, the i5 from that same generation. And I have an i5 laptop, and it's about half on the single processor, and I mean, it's pretty low for multiprocessor, even though it's a pretty decent one. So here's just the official like ZPU. As you can see here, it's 11,338, which beats out the 12,900. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and open up this card here, and then we'll get it installed. So it just has manuals, a couple manuals, a couple little intro cards. With any of these things, you should definitely read them, right? If I would have read, and then has your little sticker here. If I would have read the install motherboard kit, then I would have noticed that there was a CPU fan, which I went ahead and fixed, or set up that correctly. So the CPU ran pretty good, actually, or I should say this, the integrated video card ran pretty good. You'll be able to see the results, or you've already seen the results, but we're going to go ahead and get this one ready to install. And so you just get a card. So the card is fairly large, 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. Now I'm going to be running the display ports because both of both my monitors I'm going to use with this do use DisplayPort. So we're going to go ahead and get it kind of set up and ready to install this guy. There's a little cover here, it has to come off in order to get it on, but we're going to go ahead and set it up. So we'll be back in a moment once we get everything set up in order for us to start putting it in. Okay, now we're going to move on to the motherboard, or excuse me, the graphics card. So it's hard to see, but the graphics card goes into this silver one here, your 16X, which is what you want to put the graphics card in. So you do have to remove, I think it's on this particular one, two of the standoffs up here. So I think it's the second and third, we'll see, but it might be the first, second, and third. And on this one, you have to take out this little guard. So we got 1, 2. We'll take out this top one as well, because it may be 1 and 2. Alright, so you also have to take off the guard like I was saying. So go ahead and put this guy in there. So it is a 2 bay, or a 2 bay. So you want to have the PCI switch open. You want to slide it in nice and smooth and easy. It shouldn't take too much of a force, but you want to line it up. Once it gets lined up, it's just a little push. So just a little push. You should hear the PCI slots click. So once they kind of clicked, I like to just stick my finger back there just to make sure that they have. Then pull up a little bit, right, because it should lock it into place. We're going to put 2 more screws back in this guy just to hold it into place. And for a card this size, I would definitely tell you to put in both screws. Sometimes people have not put in both screws, and you'll start seeing what I like to call the GPU sag, which well, you'll have that anyway, but it gets worse whenever there's only one, because then it's just a pivot here. It's a pivot and then what I like to call like a locking screw. So you want to make sure you put those in there. Line it up. And then just tighten it up. Now, I am going to install on my PC a little brace. I would suggest that on with any of the modern video cards. They're pretty large, they're in charge, they take up a lot of space, but mine's just a little metal bracket that goes there. So I'm going to put back in these screws that go into the little locking port. This is made so that somebody doesn't come in and steal your, steal your video card, because it's probably very expensive in comparison to the rest, right? I mean, video cards are about half of the cost of a lot of builds these days. So just put it back on there and boom. All right, that's that. So now we're gonna do the connections. I am going to run the 8-pin off of this PCI that's a separate one, and then I'm going to run the 6-pin off of the dual version, and that's because I want to keep open one of these slots, and honestly, I don't think it really needs all this, but we do, or they do suggest it. But I'm going to leave it like this just in case I need to use one of the PCIs later. But that's personal choice. Everybody's a little different. So this is just that little stand I was talking about. Pretty simple usage. It's a screw and then a locking nut. It is magnetic, so it goes like this. There's a little rubber cushion that goes against the GPU. So how you do that is you kind of get it in place, tighten it up, and then you take a little locking nut, and push it forward. Make sure you don't get it on the fan. This one has a little bit of a curve on it, so be careful putting it in there. And like I said, it's just a brace, it'll support a little bit of the weight. All right, so that's that. We're gonna go ahead and just slide on this bottom cover. Like I said, it's just a little mesh cover for the fan on this CPU, power supply, PSU. So it just slides in there. There's 6 little grooves. The top one is magnetic, so we'll just go ahead and stick that on there. There's a little groove that it fits into. And the last thing is to slide on our old glass case here. Well, actually, the last thing to do is pull off all the little stickers. So we'll put this guy into place, and we'll put in the back screw here. Okay, so now the last thing is just put in the top screw, just to hold on the tempered glass portion. All right, so we got our antennas in, got our GPU hooked up. I'm pretty sure it probably has the old firmware on it, so I'll probably have to update the firmware there. I already went ahead and updated the firmware on the motherboard when I ran it off the Intel integrated GPU. So let's go ahead and just stick this thing upright and so I'll go ahead and just pull it off. So that's the side. The front has one similar. There's a little piece of tape here though on this. Boom. We're done. So I'm gonna go, I've already loaded Windows. I've already loaded, I like Windows 11 Pro. That's what I use. Use your own, whatever you want. We can now go and test this guy out. Okay, so here are some of the results using the user benchmark. Now, this is with the Intel Arc Rebar turned on. As you can see, the gaming shot up from I think about 22 to 137 versus the integrated GPU. The desktop is about the same. Workstation went way up because now you're offloading some of the video processing to the video processor versus the CPU. As you can see here, the scores for the gaming side is way up 113 versus I think it was like 8 before. Everything else is pretty much the same, but I like to have those for comparison so that you can see them and see them all. Okay, so next up, this is with the rebar turned off. As you can see, gaming's down about 40%. Desktop's about the same. Workstation's actually down a little bit too. I cannot understand why that is. But this is with the Intel card installed with rebar turned off. So you'll see that most of the rest of the other items are pretty similar. Here's the video card performance. As you can see, it's about 77%, so quite down quite a bit comparison to the rest. However, or the other with the rebar. However, it's still everything else is still about the same.